He spoke once, and nothing in me was the same. Not twice, not in stages, not over years. Once. There are nights, even now, after all these years, when I wake and for a moment the world is only shadow. Not the shadow of trees, not the shadow of clouds, a heavier shadow, the kind that presses on the chest. And in that first breath I do not remember my own name. I lie still, listening, because for so long, listening was how I survived. The screaming is not there anymore, but the memory of it is. It lingers like smoke in a room that has been burned. You open your eyes. You see clean walls. You see light. But you still smell the fire. And the body remembers what the mind wants to forget. I remember the sound of my own throat. Not speaking, not praying, not crying like a man cries, but splitting, breaking, making a noise that belonged to something else. And I panic, because for so long the screaming was my identity. The screaming was proof I existed. If the screaming stopped, would I disappear? If the voices left, would there be anything left inside this skin that could be called a man? Then I remember him. Not the crowd, not the sea, not the tombs. Him. I remember his name, the name I had not dared to shape with my mouth in years, and my chest loosens, and I breathe. I remember his voice. 3 words. That is all it took. 3 words, and the entire architecture of my captivity collapsed, not like a wall pushed down, but like a ruin that finally admits it cannot stand. 3 words, and the 1,000 voices that nested in me like carrion birds were torn away, screaming as they left, as if they were ripping pieces of my own flesh with them. But what he said that night, what he did that night, no one was ready. Not the men in the boat who had followed him across the water, thinking they understood what power looked like. Not the ones who watched from a distance afterward, trying to make sense of what cannot be made small enough to understand. Not the ones who had tried to bind me before. Iron on wrists, iron on ankles, hands shaking as they fastened what would not hold. Not even the thing inside me. Not the voice that was not my voice. Not the hunger that fed on my ruin. Not the chorus of rebellion that had made a throne out of my suffering. Nothing was ready. Because what he said was not anger. Not a curse thrown like lightning, not a violence to match the violence in me. What he spoke was older than fury, older than fear, a question. But not a question like men ask when they are unsure, a question wrapped in authority so complete that the air itself felt commanded into silence, a question that did not search for information, a question that exposed what was hiding. And I am here to tell you what it felt like. What it felt like when the Nazarene looked at what I had become, at the shattered ruin of a man, at the house my body had become for voices I did not invite, at the creature the world had already buried while my heart still beat, and spoke, when he spoke, and everything changed. Not just that night, not just in that place, forever, but what he said next. No one was ready to hear, not the crowd, not his enemies, not even his closest friends. Before he came, there was only the screaming. Let me tell you what that was like. You think you know darkness. You think you understand loneliness. But there is a kind of being alone that is not solitude. It is exile. An exile that follows you even when people stand near you, because they stand near your body and you are somewhere else, locked behind your own eyes, watching. I lived where the dead are kept, not because I wanted to, because the living ran out of places to put me. There were stone chambers in the cliffside cut into rock, open mouths in the earth, cool air that never warmed, wind that moved through gaps and sounded like breathing, as if the stone itself were alive. People imagine tombs as quiet places. They are not quiet. The wind makes speech out of emptiness. Insects make their small work. The earth settles and shifts like an old creature turning in sleep. Far below, the village carries on. A faint life. A cooking fire smell when the wind is right. A dog barking at nothing. A child's laugh sometimes, thin as thread, reaching places it was never meant to reach. And there are moments, cruel moments, when you think you hear your name. You lift your head, you hold your breath, you listen with your whole body. And then you realize it is only the wind. Before the voices, before I became what people whispered about, I was a man. I had a name. I had hands that held things without tearing them. I had a voice that could speak words people understood. I remember ordinary things. The weight of a clay jar, the smell of bread when it first breaks open, the sting of salt on fingers, dust on the ankles at the end of the day, the way the sky looks when evening arrives and the work finally stops. I remember my mother's hands, not in some grand scene, in small moments, straightening cloth, wiping dust from my cheek, pressing my hair back when I was too tired to care, a quiet touch that said, "You are mine. You belong." I remember my father's voice in the morning, not loud, simply present. And I remember my sister, the way she sang without thinking about it, as if joy was something she carried naturally, as if the world had never taught her to hold it back. Do you understand? I had a life. There was a rhythm to it. Mornings, midday heat, evening wind, sleep. My mind belonged to me. My body belonged to me. Then the rhythm broke. I do not know the first moment it entered. I do not know if it came like a thought, or like a shadow, or like a sickness that began as nothing. I only know what came after. There were days when my hands moved and I watched them, from somewhere deep inside, as if I had been pushed behind a wall of glass. I could see, I could feel, I could not stop. At first, people tried to help. They spoke softly. They brought water. They tried to keep their faces calm, as if calm could become a door back to myself. Someone held my shoulders and said my name slowly, over and over, as if repeating it could anchor me to the world. It did not. The nights became heavy, not because darkness is frightening on its own, because darkness gave the voices space. In the day, there were distractions. Work, sun, neighbors, noise that belonged to life. At night, there was only the inside, and the inside was no longer mine. It started with interruption, a thought that was not my thought, a whisper that did not sound like my own mind. A sudden coldness behind the ribs. Then it became pressure, a pushing, a leaning, as if something had moved into the rooms of my soul and begun to rearrange the furniture. And then, the screaming. Not always from my mouth at first, sometimes only inside, a relentless sound like a storm trapped beneath bone. But storms do not stay hidden forever. The day came when my voice broke open, when something used my throat like a tool, when my family looked at me and did not recognize what they heard. That was the first death, the first burial, not of my body, of the man they believed I was. After that, everything changed. People stopped speaking my name with warmth. They began to speak it with caution. Children were pulled behind doorways when I passed. Neighbors started closing things. Gates, windows, conversations. And my mother's eyes began to carry a question she did not know how to ask. How do you love someone you cannot reach? They tried to restrain me. Chains, iron on wrists, iron on ankles. The weight of them was almost comfort. Not because I liked being bound, because the weight meant you are still here, you are still real, you are still a man someone believes can be held. But the chains never held. I would feel the cold bite of metal. I would feel it tighten, and then, like reeds snapping, like cord rotting, like something weak pretending to be strong, it would break, and the running would begin. Not the running of a man with purpose, the running of a body driven, into the hills, into the rocks, into the places where no one follows. They came after me sometimes. Not always, not forever. They brought new chains. They brought ropes. They brought men with hard hands and frightened eyes. They shouted. They called out words that sounded holy from a distance. And I, some part of me, a small part that still remembered my mother's voice, wanted to help them, wanted to run far enough away that my existence would not harm anyone. But the noise inside me was faster than my legs. Imagine this. Imagine your mind filled with voices speaking at once in a language you do not understand. Not one voice, not 10, a crowd without number, compressed into a single human throat. Imagine your own mouth making sounds you did not choose. Imagine your own hands tearing at your skin while you scream inside yourself for them to stop. Imagine heat inside your ribs, not fever heat, a burning that feels like something alive, consuming you from within. No water can touch it. No darkness can cool it. That was every day, every night, every moment that was not the mercy of unconsciousness. The pain was not the worst part. Pain is still sensation. Pain is still proof of life. Pain is still a conversation between you and your body. The worst part was the knowing, the awareness that remained, locked away somewhere deep inside, watching everything. Knowing your hands were cutting you. Knowing your voice was breaking into sounds that did not belong to you. Knowing you could not stop it. And no one could help you. They spoke to me in the dark, not like a sickness speaks, not like fever. They spoke like minds. They told me I was finished. They told me I'd always been theirs. They told me I was marked before breath. And after enough nights, you start to believe what the night repeats. The village gave up. The roads emptied when I appeared. Faces turned away. Even the place of prayer felt distant. Not because it moved, but because I did. So they brought me to the tombs. And there I stayed. Because the dead do not complain. The dead do not need their peace protected. The dead do not gather stones and shout and tremble as they fasten iron. The dead simply lie still. But I was not dead. And that was the cruelty of it. To be breathing among the dead while something inside you screams like you are already buried. If you want to hear more moments like this, the words, the encounters, the silences, subscribe to The Nazarene Speaks. This channel exists to listen and to remember. Where are you listening from? Write your city or country in the comments. His voice reaches farther than we imagine. Not like news comes. Not like a clean message carried by a clear voice. A rumor comes like wind. It moves through people. It changes shape in their mouths. It arrives in fragments. I heard it first as a sound outside the tombs, a word spoken too quickly, a name swallowed like it was dangerous to say aloud. Jesus, a teacher, a healer, a man who spoke and sickness fled, a man who touched what others would not touch, a man whose voice did not argue with darkness. It interrupted it. The tombs carry sound strangely. A voice hits stone and returns altered, as if the rock itself refuses to hold certain words untouched. His name arrived like that. It came, and came back, and came again. It did not sound like rumor when it returned. It sounded like something the world was reluctantly confessing. And something in me, something buried beneath years of noise, heard that name and trembled. Not with joy, with instinct, with recognition I did not understand. The voices inside me reacted before I did. They shifted. Not the usual restless movement, not the ordinary hunger that lived in my ribs. This was different, as if something had passed over the surface of the sea and the water had remembered it. He's near, they whispered, not as a threat, as a warning. I felt them move inside me like creatures trapped in a shrinking space, like prisoners hearing keys turn in locks they thought would never open. And I thought, he wouldn't come here. Why would a holy man come to the place of the dead? Why would a teacher walk into a field of tombs? Why would he cross water to stand where people leave what they cannot bear? This land was not the center of devotion. It was the edge. The kind of edge where people learn to live without expecting help. The kind of edge where shame settles and stays because there is nowhere else for it to go. So even if the rumor was true, even if he was real, even if his voice carried authority, he would not come to me. And even if he did, he wouldn't look at me. He would see what I had become and turn away. Everyone turned away. The living learn quickly. Avoid what cannot be healed. Avoid what might stain you. Avoid what you do not understand. I had become the lesson. The warning whispered to children. The reason doors closed. The shape of fear in the distance. So when I heard that he was near, that he had come, that a boat had crossed and his feet had touched this ground, the screaming changed. It became frantic. The voices inside me began to argue with each other. Some hissed with rage. Some tightened with fear. Some tried to sound calm and failed. Their usual arrogance, their certainty, cracked, and through that crack something new appeared. Fear. Not my fear. Their fear. A fear ancient and raw, like an animal sensing fire before it arrives. He is here, they said again. And they said it as if saying it might delay him, as if naming him might keep him at a distance. What does he want? Why has he come? Has he come for us? And if he had come for them, then he had come for me. That thought should have been hope. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, because hope demands something. Hope demands you admit you are wounded. Hope demands you accept you have been bound. Hope means believing you are worth unbinding. And I did not believe that. I could not. Years do things to a soul. Years of being avoided. Years of iron failing. Years of prayers shouted from a distance like stones. Years of watching your own hands injure you while your mind begs stop into an empty room. Years teach you a doctrine. Not written, not preached, learned. Some people are too far gone. Some darkness is final. So when the rumor grew louder, I did not move toward it. I moved away, deeper into stone, further from the shoreline. I pressed myself into the cold places where light does not linger. And the voices liked that. They settled into their certainty again. He will not come here, they said. He does not speak to this. He does not speak to you. But their calm was thin. It cracked easily, because the rumor did not stop. It kept moving, and the more it moved, the more the fear returned to them. Not fear of a crowd, not fear of men with ropes, not fear of iron, fear of a voice. They began to speak to me in a different tone, not mocking, urgent. You cannot go near him. You cannot be seen. You cannot be touched by that. They spoke as if they were protecting something, but they were protecting themselves, and the strangest thing happened inside me. Their fear awakened a hunger, a small hunger, a dangerous hunger. What if their fear meant something? What if it meant the world had not been telling the truth? What if the story that said I was finished was not the final story? That thought came with pain. Because if rescue is possible, then all those years were not just suffering. They were captivity. And admitting captivity is its own wound. It means accepting the prison was real. It means acknowledging you did not merely endure darkness. You belonged to it. And I could not bear that. Not fully. So I tried to kill the hope before it grew. I cut myself until the pain became the only clear language between me and my own body. I screamed until my throat felt like it had turned to ash. I tried to make myself so ruined that if he did look, he would see it was too late. I tried to make it logical, to be rejected, to remain unseen. I repeated the same sentence until it became something like prayer. Not a prayer to God, a prayer to despair. He wouldn't speak to someone like me. Even if he saw me, he would turn away. I said it inside. I said it with my breath. I said it with my blood. because if I could convince myself of rejection, I would not have to face the terror of being seen. But the terror did not leave. It sat in my chest like a stone, because somewhere in the distance the rumor became more than rumor. It became presence, not loud, not dramatic, just nearer. And the nearer it became, the more my body betrayed me. My muscles tightened as if they were listening without permission. My breath shortened as if it was being pulled toward the shoreline. My mind split into two movements. One part of me wanted to run to him, not boldly, not confidently, like someone reaching for water after years of thirst. And another part of me wanted to disappear, because if he spoke to me, if he truly spoke, then my life could not remain as it was. If he looked at me and did not turn away, then the tombs would no longer be home. And that thought, that possibility, was terrifying. Because prisons become familiar, because captivity becomes routine, because even pain can become identity. The voices used that. They reminded me of the tombs. They reminded me of how the village looked at me, how people flinched, how children hid. They reminded me of the first chain snapping, the first prayer failing, the first time my mother cried when she thought I could not hear her. They pressed those memories against my mind like weights. "Stay," they whispered, and yet the name remained. Jesus. It did not leave the air. It lingered. And the fear inside me began to sound like something close to panic, because they could feel him, and I could feel that they could feel him. And that meant his presence was not rumor anymore. It was approach. It was direction. It was the world moving toward a moment it could not undo. And I found myself asking a question I could not answer, not out loud, not to anyone, inside, like a wound opening. And if he speaks? But the rumor did not stop. It moved, quietly at first, then everywhere, not like a wave, like breath, one mouth to another, one whisper to the next. A sentence repeated with trembling, because people were repeating something they did not know how to carry. His voice had been heard near the water, not shouted, spoken. And people began to repeat what they could not explain, not stories with certainty, not accounts with clean edges, fragments. Someone touched him, and was no longer the same. Someone who could not see opened their eyes and did not close them again. Someone who had been still for too long stood up. That was all. No argument, no proof. Only that sentence, returning again and again, as if the world itself was learning new rules. Something happens when he speaks. Those words reached the tombs. They reached me. They should have felt like hope. Instead, they felt like danger, because hope demands something. Hope asks questions you cannot ignore. Hope forces you to look at the wound instead of learning how to live around it. Hope asks whether what is broken can be restored. And I did not believe that. I could not. The voices pressed closer when the rumors grew louder. "He has no interest in you," they said, calmly, confidently. "He speaks to those who are clean, to those who still belong among the living. You are already finished. You were finished before you knew you were alive." Their certainty wrapped around me like stone, and I stayed where I was, because staying felt safer than being seen. Days passed, or nights passed. Time is not kind in the tombs. It does not move like it does among the living. It circles. It repeats. It becomes a single long stretch of darkness broken only by the mercy of sleep. And even sleep was not rest. Sleep was collapse, a falling away of consciousness so I would not have to watch what my body did. But even when I collapsed, the rumor stayed awake. It kept pressing at the edges of my mind, not with details, with the same simple impossibility. He spoke, and something changed. That sentence began to feel like a knocking, not loud, persistent, as if the world was asking to be led into a room I had sealed. Sometimes the rumor came from far away, a shout carried by wind from the road, a passing traveler's voice bright with excitement, a group speaking too quickly, too urgently, as if they were afraid the story might evaporate if they stopped telling it. Sometimes it came like this: silence outside the tombs, then footsteps, then hurried speech, then the sound of people leaving again, as if the stone places were wrong to linger near, and always, after they left, the voices inside me would speak. They would try to cover the rumor with their own words. They would pour certainty on it like sand on blood. He is not for you. He's not coming. He does not enter places like this. He will not look. They said it so often I began to hear it even when they were not speaking, as if it had become part of the air. But something else began to grow alongside it. Not hope, not yet. Something closer to longing. Longing is not optimistic. Longing does not promise. Longing is simply a pain that points somewhere. It was the pain of remembering light, only faintly, only enough to make the darkness unbearable. I began to notice things I had stopped noticing. The way the wind changes before a storm arrives. The way birds go silent when something unseen moves through the hills. The way the air itself can feel as if it is listening. Then the wind changed. Not suddenly, not violently, just enough to notice. It moved through the tombs differently that day, as if the air itself were holding its breath. And with the change came something else. Not rumor, not echo, footsteps, careful ones, human ones. Men who did not belong there. They did not move like hunters. They did not move like soldiers. They moved like people looking for something they were not sure they wanted to find. I heard their voices before I saw them. Low, uncertain, asking if anyone was there, asking if it was safe. It was not safe. The tombs never are. And I was not safe either. The voices inside me reacted immediately. He is close. No confidence now. Fear. They moved inside me like something trapped. He will take what is ours. You belong to us. Their fear should have terrified me. Instead, it unsettled something deeper, because fear like that does not exist without reason. And for the first time, the darkness felt unbearable. Not because it hurt, because I could remember light, only faintly, only enough to miss it. The men were closer now. Their breathing echoed off stone. Their words fell into places where words usually died. They were calling, not shouting, calling, as if they believed someone might answer, as if they believed a voice could reach even here. They were looking for him, and they were walking toward me. Everything in me resisted. My body tightened, my thoughts fractured. The voices pulled hard, twisting my limbs, shaping my movements into something wrong. They did not want me near him, and neither did I. Not fully, because being near him meant being seen, and being seen meant there would be no excuses left. Still, I moved, not quickly, not boldly, slowly, like someone waking from a dream and not trusting the ground. Each step felt borrowed. Each breath felt contested. My body moved and I followed it, toward the men, toward the edge of the tombs, toward the place where rumor becomes presence. The distance was not great, but it felt endless, like crossing a boundary that had held for years. More than once, I almost stopped. More than once, I almost turned back. The voices whispered reasons, logical reasons, safe reasons. He won't look at you. He won't speak to you. You will be seen and left in the open. You will be exposed and still unhealed. And exposure without rescue is cruelty. So I hesitated. And then something deeper than fear pulled again. Not desire. Need. A need so old I had forgotten it could still exist. To be whole. The men reached the open ground. Light touched their shoulders. And then I saw him. Not fully, not clearly, just enough. Standing where light met ground. and the sight of him did not feel like triumph. It felt like a threshold, like a line drawn in the earth. Everything inside me paused. Not the voices, not yet. Something deeper, something that felt like recognition, like remembering a word I had not spoken in years. And in that moment, I knew whatever came next would not leave me unchanged, that I would either be undone or restored, and I could no longer tell which one I feared more. I ran toward him, but I was not the one running. My body moved, and I watched it from behind my own eyes, like a man trapped behind a door he cannot open and cannot break. My mouth opened. Sound came out that I did not choose. Not words, not prayer. Noise, a wrong sound, a thing using a human throat as if the throat were only a tool and not a part of a person. The ground blurred beneath my feet. Stone. Dust. Cold air rushing into lungs that did not know whether to breathe or to scream. I saw the fishermen's faces. Fear first. The instinct that steps back. Shock next. The moment they recognized that there was no chain for this, no rope, no plan, no weapon that could touch what lived inside me. And I understood them, because I had been the thing everyone stepped away from, the thing you do not approach unless you have to, the thing you do not name unless you are warning someone. I was close enough now to see him clearly, and what I saw on his face was not what I had prepared myself for. Not disgust, not recoil, not the quick turning away I had rehearsed in my mind 1,000 times. He was calm, not calm like a man pretending, not calm like someone brave because an audience is watching, calm like the sea after a storm when it has decided to be still. And that calm was terrifying, because it meant this moment could not be controlled. It meant nothing in me could frighten him into retreat. It meant my ruin was not the largest thing in the space between us. His eyes held me, and the holding was like fire, not burning, revealing, as if a lamp had been lit in a room where I had hidden my entire life. I felt seen, not the way people see and then flinch, seen as if he already knew what was under the noise, as if he could look past the occupation and find the man buried beneath it. There was nowhere to hide from that gaze, no corner in the mind, no fold in the darkness, and the closer I came, the more I realized that what I wanted most and what I feared most were the same thing. Nearness. Because nearness meant the lies could not stay unchallenged. Nearness meant the excuses died. Nearness meant the prison could not remain comfortable. The voices surged. Not brave now, desperate. They tried to speak through me, to name him, to frame him, to control the moment with sound. They forced confession into my mouth like a weapon, holy words, but spoken with stolen breath. Truth, but used for delay. They named him as if naming him could keep him at a distance. They confessed as if confession could replace obedience, and I felt it in my bones, because I had lived with words for years that did not heal me. Words shouted from far away, words thrown like stones, words that sounded holy and still left me bleeding in the same darkness. The voices threw themselves against the invisible boundary between him and me. I felt the pressure of their resistance, not like muscle, like weight, like something refusing to be moved even when it knows it must be moved. And in the middle of that war inside my skin, a thought rose, quiet, almost fragile. What if he does not turn away? What if the thing I fear most is not his rejection, but his nearness? Because nearness would mean he could see what I had tried to hide even from myself. Nearness would mean he could call out what had renamed me. Nearness would mean he could demand the truth from the mouth that had been used for lies. I wanted to run, not from him, from the possibility of becoming whole, because wholeness is weighty. Wholeness means you cannot hide behind the noise anymore. Wholeness means you cannot blame the darkness for everything you became. Wholeness means you will have to live again as a man. And being a man again felt like stepping into a world I no longer knew how to survive. My feet slowed. My breath shook. The voices tried to pull me back like a tide. They filled my mind with the familiar logic. He didn't notice you. He won't speak. You will be exposed and left exposed. Better the tombs than the light. Better to be unseen than to be seen and still unhealed. And for a moment, a single, small moment, I almost agreed, because the tombs were cruel, but they were familiar. Their cold was predictable. Their loneliness was routine. Their darkness had rules I understood. But then his calm remained. His eyes remained, not chasing, not retreating, just present, as if he had already decided that whatever stood before him would not be dismissed. And something in me, something buried deep beneath years of noise, leaned forward, not with strength, with consent, not loudly, not confidently, just the smallest surrender of the will that had been trapped for so long. Yes, and that yes did not feel like victory. It felt like stepping onto a threshold you cannot step back from. It felt like letting go of the only companion you had known, even when that companion was darkness. I stood there, trembling in ways I did not command, and I realized this moment was not asking whether he could free me. This moment was asking whether I would let him, whether I would stop clinging to a prison just because it was familiar, whether I would surrender the darkness even though it had been my only shelter. And the part of me that still remembered my name stood still long enough to be found. Yes, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. What is your name? Nothing rushed, no spectacle, no thunder, no sky tearing open, no sudden brightness meant to impress the crowd, only a voice, and the strange, unbearable feeling that everything had been waiting for that voice. The air felt different, not warmer, not colder, different, like the space between one breath and the next had become wider, as if the world itself had slowed down to make room for what had been spoken. I had heard shouting all my life. I had heard my own mouth become a weapon. I had heard noise that broke people's courage before they even saw me. But this was not shouting. This was not noise competing with noise. This was not a battle of volume. It was the sound of authority that does not need to prove itself, a sentence that did not climb. It simply arrived. And when it arrived, it did not ask permission from anything in me. It did not negotiate with the thing that had nested in my mind. It did not speak around the darkness. It spoke through it. And for the first time, I felt the prison recognize a door. Not because someone described the door, not because I imagined the door, because the lock, somewhere deep inside the ruin of me, finally heard the turning of a key. I had expected violence. I had expected collapse. I had expected to be thrown to the ground as if holiness always needed a dramatic stage. But the first change was quieter than that. The first change was pressure, a shift, as if something heavy that had lived in my chest for years had moved, only a little, only enough for me to notice that movement was possible. I could feel the thing inside me react, not with confidence, not with arrogance, with hesitation, with a kind of recoil that did not know how to hide itself. And then the second sentence remained. The question, not rushed, not thrown like a hook to catch information, not asked like a man asking because he is unsure. It was asked like light entering a room and refusing to pretend it cannot see. What is your name? Do. That question did something I cannot fully describe without breaking it. Because what it did was not simply expose the thing inside me. It exposed the confusion that had lived in me for years. The blur, the merging, the way my own thoughts had begun to sound like their thoughts. The way my own fear had worn their voice like a cloak. I had stopped knowing where I ended, where the invasion ended, where the lie ended, where the man began. And the question cut through that blur like a line drawn across the ground, a line not to be crossed, a line not to be ignored. It was as if the Nazarene was not only commanding the darkness to leave, he was demanding that it be named, not for his sake, for mine. Because unnamed darkness can pretend to be your identity. Unnamed bondage can disguise itself as just who you are. Unnamed lies can keep returning, quietly, until you accept them as law. But a name is a boundary. A name is a confession. A name is exposure. And exposure is unbearable to things that live by hiding. The world held its breath. Even the wind, even the stone, even the sea behind me. Not because anyone told it to. Not because anyone commanded nature to be still, but because stillness is what happens when creation recognizes the voice it was made to obey. It was not dramatic. It was precise. It was the kind of stillness that feels like a courtroom, not because someone is performing, because the verdict is about to be spoken. Inside me, the grip did not break like a chain snapping loudly. It loosened like fingers finally losing strength. Not by force, by certainty. A certainty that did not argue. A certainty that simply was. For years, the voices had lived like owners. They had spoken like kings. They had moved my body as if my body were property. But when the Nazarene spoke, their ownership sounded suddenly thin, like paper soaked in water, like a contract held over flame, like something that had always been illegal, always been a theft. Only now the rightful authority had arrived, and the theft could no longer pretend. I felt resistance as weight, as delay, as something refusing to release what it claimed as its own, the way a hand grips tighter when it knows it is about to be pried open, the way darkness presses harder when it senses light, the way fear fights with everything it has when peace steps closer. And the strangest part was this. I could feel the battle happening, but I could also feel that the battle was already decided. Not because I was strong, not because I was brave, but because the voice did not waver, because the question did not change, because the command did not need to repeat itself to gain power. Power was already present, and the prison knew it. And then, the noise broke, not into louder noise, into absence, like a crowd leaving a room, like a storm passing beyond the hills, like a chain falling to the ground and no longer needing to be held. There was no echo of it clinging to the walls of my thoughts. No after voice whispering, "We will return." No lingering pressure in the ribs. No hidden hand testing my mind for weakness. Just the sudden, unfamiliar fact that my mind was mine. The question remained. What is your name? Not as a threat, not as a performance, as if the Nazarene would not only free my body, but name the darkness that had tried to rename me. As if he would not allow the lie to exit silently. As if he would not allow what had destroyed me to leave without being brought into the light. As if he would restore something deeper than calm, identity, boundary, truth. And I realized something, quietly, in the stillness after the breaking. He did not speak to the darkness the way men speak to darkness. He did not shout at it. He did not fear it. He did not treat it like an equal enemy. He treated it like something that did not belong, something out of place, something already judged. And when he spoke, time itself seemed to wait. Not because time was impressed, but because time recognized authority older than itself. And in that waiting, in that silence that finally belonged to me, I understood. This was the moment my life returned. Not with spectacle. With a voice, a command that freed, a question that named, and nothing that had lived in me before could survive being spoken to like that. The first thing I noticed was the stillness, not emptiness, stillness, as if something that had always been moving had finally stopped and the world did not know yet how to behave without the noise. For years, movement was proof I existed. Noise meant presence. Pressure meant life. Now there was neither. I listened. Out of habit, out of fear, out of years spent waiting for something to answer back. But nothing did. No echo, no resistance, no invisible hand pressing against my thoughts. Only breath. Uneven at first, careful, mine. I waited for the familiar pain, the tearing, the heat inside my ribs, the sensation of being occupied. It did not come. I waited for the interruption, for the invasion, for the moment when silence would be revealed as only a brief trick, but the voices did not return, and that absence was louder than anything I had ever heard, because I realized I was alone inside myself, not lonely, alone, as a person is meant to be. I opened my hands slowly. There was no hesitation in them, no invisible will guiding the movement. They opened because I opened them. That alone felt like a miracle too quiet to explain. For years, my body had been a place where decisions were made without me, where motion happened while I watched from a distance like a prisoner watching his own cell. Now my body waited, obedient, peaceful, mine. I stayed where I was because no one forced me to move. The ground beneath me felt solid, not hostile, not claiming me, not hungry for my collapse, just ground. I lowered myself down, not because I collapsed, not because strength failed, because I chose to. Choice felt new, and the quiet frightened me at first, because silence is not neutral. Silence does not distract. Silence reveals. In the quiet, I became aware of myself again, not as something occupied, not as something watched from a distance, but as someone present, thinking, breathing, here. Time moved differently. There was no urgency, no demand that I perform gratitude, no pressure to say the correct words, no expectation that I explain what cannot be explained. The fishermen stood back. I could feel their fear softening into astonishment, but even astonishment kept its distance. People always keep distance from ruins, even when the ruin is being rebuilt. And then someone brought clothing. I remember that detail because it was so small and so human. A piece of fabric. A covering. A quiet way of saying, "You are allowed back among the living." I took it with hands that obeyed me. I wrapped myself in it. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight of being a man and not a warning. Not a spectacle. Not a story people told to keep children from wandering too far. A man. I sat, not among the dead, in the open, where light touches ground, and the light did not accuse me. Tears came. Not violently, not like a storm, slowly, as if they had been waiting for permission. They fell because there was room for them now, and with the tears came something else. Grief. Not only for what had been done to me, but for the years, for the lost days that would not return, for the nights I had spent believing the tombs were all I deserved, for the moments when my mother's voice had faded into distance because she could not come near, for the name I had forgotten. Grief came quietly, like a shadow that follows healing, because deliverance removes the chains, but it does not erase the memory of the iron. I did not speak. Words were not ready, only the understanding that something had ended, and it had ended completely. What died did not linger. What left did not negotiate a return. The occupation was gone, and with it, a version of me that could never have been healed while the noise remained. Something else was being born, not fully formed, not confident, but real. I did not yet know who I was. I only knew who I was not anymore, and that was enough. He remained nearby, not standing over me, not watching for a response, not waiting for praise, just there, as if staying was part of the restoration, as if presence itself was mercy, and in that presence I understood something quietly. Freedom does not announce itself. It settles. It does not shout. It remains. I was still sitting there when the strangest desire rose in me. To follow him. To leave everything. Even the ground I sat on, and walk behind that voice forever. Because the voice had not only freed me, it had found me, and finding is a kind of calling. But he did not pull me into spectacle. He did not turn my healing into a performance. He did not demand I prove anything. He gave me something gentler and harder, a life, a return, a road back into people, a road back into sunlight without fear of collapsing. And that is when I realized the miracle was not only the silence, the miracle was the future, a future that had not existed for me until his word made space for it. I sat there longer than I meant to, because I did not know how to stand as myself. But eventually I stood. And when I stood, nothing inside me fought it. No resistance, no hidden grip, only me standing as a man again. And I knew, without needing to look ahead, that whatever life would come next, it would never again belong to what had taken me before. What word from him still echoes in you? One word is enough. If this moment mattered to you, leave a like. It helps these words reach others who are listening. I am no longer screaming among the stones. That man ended the night he spoke. The man who lived in darkness, who tore at himself, who heard a crowd of voices where his own thoughts should have been. That man was undone. But I am still here, still walking roads I once ran in madness, still breathing air that belongs to me, still living with hands that obey me. And I carry something now that I did not have then, the knowledge that deliverance can be quiet and still absolute. Listen to me. You may not live among tombs. You may never have felt iron on your wrists. You may never have heard 1,000 voices. You may never have been driven into wilderness by something you could not name. But you know what a prison is. Not always made of stone. Sometimes made of memory. Sometimes made of shame. Sometimes made of the same thought returning every night until it feels like law. You are beyond reach. Sometimes your prison is fear that never rests. Sometimes it is guilt you cannot outpace. Sometimes it is the weight of what you have done, or what was done to you, pressing on you like a hand that will not lift. And sometimes the cruelest prison is the voice inside that says, if anyone sees you clearly, they will turn away. That is how people learn to live in shadow. Not because they love shadow, because shadow feels safer than being known. Because being known means the excuses die. Because being known means the truth must be faced. But I was seen, and he did not step back. If he spoke to me in that place, the place no one visits unless they must, the place where the living leave what they cannot bear, the place where names are forgotten, then do not tell yourself your darkness is too deep for his voice. Do not tell yourself your shame is too old. Do not tell yourself you must become clean first. He does not come only for the clean. He does not speak only to the steady. He does not wait until you become easy to love. His voice is not a reward, it is rescue. And sometimes rescue begins with something simple. A word, not many words, not an argument, not a lecture, a word that reaches what has been hiding, a word that calls what is buried back to the surface, a word that unbinds what you could never unbind. If he spoke once, and everything in me changed, then he can speak again. Not loudly, not publicly, but decisively. He can speak in the place you do not name. He can speak in the fear that tightens your chest. He can speak in the thought that returns every night and tells you are finished. And when he speaks, you may not feel thunder. You may not feel spectacle. You may feel something quieter. Stillness. Breath. A moment when the noise pauses. A moment when you realize you are here, and you are not alone. And that is how the healing begins. Not always with fireworks, sometimes with silence, sometimes with the first honest breath you have taken in years. Sometimes with the strange realization that you do not have to run anymore, that you do not have to hide anymore, that you do not have to punish yourself into worthiness. Because his voice does not ask whether you deserve to be freed. His voice declares that you can be. And once you have heard that voice, truly heard it, you cannot return to the tomb as home. You may still remember the stone. You may still feel the cold at times, but you will know there is a way out. You will know there is a name stronger than the names that have tried to rename you. You will know that your story is not finished where the darkness wants to end it. Next, we will witness another moment, another voice, another soul standing before him. If you want to continue walking through these encounters, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Remain, listen, and walk with us. Because the Nazarene speaks.